Why? What's doin'? Just the usual thing. We go into old Susie's place. Hell of a nice place. Old Susie's a laugh, always crackin' jokes. Like she says when we come up on the front porch last Saturday night. Susie opens the door and then she yells over her shoulder, "Get your coats on, girls, here comes the sheriff." She never talks dirty, neither. Got 5 girls there. What's it set you back? George asked. 2.5. You can get a shot for 2 hits. Susie got nice chairs to set in, too. If a guy don't want a flop, why he can just set in the chairs and have a couple or 3 shots and pass the time of day, and Susie don't give a damn. She ain't rushin' guys through and kickin' 'em out if they don't want a flop. Might go in and look the joint over, said George. Sure. Come along. It's a hell of a lot of fun, her crackin' jokes all the time. Like she says one time, she says, "I've knew people that if they got a rag rug on the floor and a Cupid doll lamp on the phonograph, they think they're running a parlor house." That's Clara's house she's talkin' about. And Susie says, "I know what you boys want," she says. "My girls is clean," she says, "and there ain't no water in my whiskey," she says. "If any you guys want to look at a Cupid doll lamp and take your own chance gettin' burned, why you know where to go." And she says, "There's guys around here walkin' bow-legged 'cause they like to look at a Cupid doll lamp." George asked, "Clara runs the other house, huh?" "Yeah," said Whit. "We don't never go there. Clara gets $3 a crack and 35 cents a shot, and she don't crack no jokes. But Susie's place is clean and she got nice chairs. Don't let no goo-goos in, neither." "Me and Lennie's rollin' up a steak," said George. "I might go in and set and have a shot, but I ain't puffin' out no 2.5. "Well, a guy got to have some fun sometime," said Whit. The door opened and Lennie and Carlson came in together. Lennie crept to his bunk and sat down, trying not to attract attention. Carlson reached under his bunk and brought out his bag. He didn't look at old Candy, who still faced the wall. Carlson found a little cleaning rod in the bag and a can of oil. He laid them on his bed and then brought out the pistol, took out the magazine and snapped the loaded shell from the chamber. Then he fell to cleaning the barrel with the little rod. When the ejector snapped, Candy turned over and looked for a moment at the gun before he turned back to the wall again. Carlson said casually, "Curly been in yet?" "No," said Whit. "What's eatin' on Curly?" Carlson squinted down the barrel of his gun. "Lookin' for his old lady. I seen him going round and round outside." Whit said sarcastically, "He spends half his time lookin' for her, and the rest of the time she's lookin' for him." Curly burst into the room excitedly. "Any you guys seen my wife?" he demanded. "She ain't been here," said Whit. Curly looked threateningly about the room. "Where the hell's Slim?" "Went out in the barn," said George. "He was gonna put some tar on a split hoof." Curly's shoulders dropped and squared. "How long ago'd he go?" 5-10 minutes. Curly jumped out the door and banged it after him. Whit stood up. "I guess maybe I'd like to see this," he said. "Curly's just spoilin' or he wouldn't start for Slim. And Curly's handy, goddamn handy. Got in the finals for the Golden Gloves. He got newspaper clippings about it." He considered. "But just the same, he better leave Slim alone. Nobody don't know what Slim can do." "Thinks Slim's with his wife, don't he?" said George. "Looks like it," Whit said. "Course Slim ain't. Least I don't think Slim is. But I like to see the fuss if it comes off. Come on, le's go." George said, "I'm stayin' right here. I don't want to get mixed up in nothing. Lennie and me got to make a steak." Carlson finished the cleaning of the gun and put it in the bag and pushed the bag under his bunk. "I guess I'll go out and look her over," he said. Old Candy lay still, and Lennie, from his bunk, watched George cautiously. When Whit and Carlson were gone and the door closed after them, George turned to Lennie. "What you got on your mind?" "I ain't done nothing, George. Slim says I better not pet them pups so much for a while. Slim says it ain't good for them, so I come right in." "I been good, George." "I coulda told you that," said George. "Well, I wasn't hidin' none. I just had mine in my lap pettin' it." George asked, "Did you see Slim out in the barn?" "Sure I did. He told me I better not pet that pup no more." "Did you see that girl?" "You mean Curly's girl?" "Yeah. Did she come in the barn?" "No. Anyways, I never seen her." "You never seen Slim talkin' to her?" She ain't been in the barn." "Okay," said George. "I just had mine in my lap pettin' it." George asked, "Did you see Slim out in the barn?" "Sure I did. He told me I better not pet that pup no more." "Did you see that girl?" "You mean Curly's girl?" "Yeah. Did she come in the barn?" "No. Anyways, I never seen her." "You never seen Slim talkin' to her?" She ain't been in the barn." "Okay," said George. He used a deliberate, thoughtful slowness. Lennie reached for a face card and studied it, then turned it upside down and studied it. "Both ends the same," he said. "George, why is it both ends the same?" "I don't know," said George. "That's just the way they make 'em." "What was Slim doin' in the barn when you seen him?" "Slim? Sure. You seen him in the barn, and he told you not to pet the pup so much." "Oh, yeah. He had a can of tar and a paintbrush." "I don't know what for." "You sure that girl didn't come in like she come in here today?" "No. She never come." George sighed. "You give me a good whorehouse every time," he said. "A guy can go in and get drunk and get everything out of his system all at once, and no messes. And he knows how much it's gonna set him back. These here jail baits is just set on the trigger of the hooskow." Lennie followed his words admiringly, and moved his lips a little to keep up. George continued, "You remember Andy Cushman, Lennie? Went to grammar school? The one that his old lady used to make hot cakes for the kids?" Lennie asked. "Yeah. That's the one. You can remember anything if there's anything to eat in it." George looked carefully at the solitaire hand. He put an ace up on his scoring rack and piled a 2, 3, and 4 of diamonds on it. "Andy's in San Quentin right now on account of a tart," said George. Lennie drummed on the table with his fingers. "George? Huh? George, how long's it gonna be till we get that little place and live on the fat of the lawn and rabbits?" "I don't know," said George. "We gotta get a big steak together. I know a little place we can get cheap, but they ain't givin' it away." Old Candy turned slowly over. His eyes were wide open. He watched George carefully. Lennie said, "Tell about that place, George. I just told you, just last night." "Go on, tell again, George." "Well, it's 10 acres, said George. "Got a little windmill. Got a little shack on it, and a chicken run. Got a kitchen, orchard, cherries, apples, peaches, cots, nuts, got a few berries. They's a place for alfalfa and plenty water to flood it. They's a pig pen dash and rabbits, George. No place for rabbits now, but I could easy build a few hutches and you could feed alfalfa to the rabbits." "Damn right, I could," said Lennie. "You goddamn right I could." George's hands stopped working with the cards. His voice was growing warmer. "And we could have a few pigs. I could build a smokehouse like the one Grandpa had, and when we kill a pig we can smoke the bacon and the hams, and make sausage and all like that. And when the salmon run up river we could catch 100 of 'em and salt 'em down or smoke 'em. We could have them for breakfast. They ain't nothing so nice as smoked salmon. When the fruit come in we could can it, and tomatoes, they're easy to can. Every Sunday we'd kill a chicken or a rabbit. Maybe we'd have a cow or a goat, and the cream is so goddamn thick you got to cut it with a knife and take it out with a spoon. Lennie watched him with wide eyes, and old Candy watched him too. Lennie said softly, "We could live off of the fat of the lawn, . Sure," said George. "All kinds of vegetables in the garden, and if we want a little whiskey we can sell a few eggs or something, or some milk. We'd just live there. We'd belong there. There wouldn't be no more runnin' round the country and gettin' fed by a Jap cook. No, sir, we'd have our own place where we belonged and not sleep in no bunt house." "Tell about the house, George," Lennie begged. "Sure, we'd have a little house and a room to ourself. Little fat iron stove, and in the winter we'd keep a fire goin' in it. It ain't enough land so we'd have to work too hard. Maybe 6-7 hours a day. We wouldn't have to buck no barley 11 hours a day. And when we put in a crop, why, we'd be there to take the crop up. We'd know what come of our planting." "And rabbits," Lennie said eagerly. "And I'd take care of 'em." "Tell how I'd do that, George." "Sure, you'd go out in the alfalfa patch and you'd have a sack. You'd fill up the sack and bring it in and put it in the rabbit cages. They'd nibble and they'd nibble," said Lennie, "the way they do. I seen 'em. Ever 6 weeks or so," George continued, "them does would throw a litter so we'd have plenty rabbits to eat and to sell. And we'd keep a few pigeons to go flyin' around the windmill like they done when I was a kid." He looked raptly at the wall over Lennie's head. "And it'd be our own, and nobody could can us. If we don't like a guy we can say, 'Get the hell out,' and by God he's got to do it. And if a friend come along, why we'd have an extra bunk, and we'd say, 'Why don't you spend the night?' and by God he would. We'd have a setter dog and a couple striped cats, but you gotta watch out them cats don't get the little rabbits." Lennie breathed hard. "You just let 'em try to get the rabbits. I'll break their goddamn necks. I'll smash 'em with a stick." He subsided, grumbling to himself, threatening the future cats which might dare to disturb the future rabbits. George sat entranced with his own picture. When Candy spoke they both jumped as though they had been caught doing something reprehensible. Candy said, "You know where's a place like that?" George was on guard immediately. "S'pose I do," he said. "What's that to you? You don't need to tell me where it's at. Might be any place." "Sure," said George. Candy said, "I ain't much good with only one hand. I lost my hand right here on this ranch. That's why they give me a job swampin'. And they give me $250, 'cause I lost my hand and I got 50 more saved up right in the bank, right now. There's 300, and I got 50 more comin' the end of the month. Tell you what dash," he leaned forward eagerly. "S'pose I went in with you guys. There's $350 I'd put in. I ain't much good, but I could cook and tend the chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be?" George half closed his eyes. "I gotta think about that. We was always gonna do it by ourselves." Candy interrupted him, "I'd make a will and leave my share to you guys in case I kick off, 'cause I ain't got no relatives nor nothing. You guys got any money? Maybe we could do her right now." George spat on the floor disgustedly. "We got $10 between us." "That's right. You couldn't find it in 100 years. Candy went on excitedly, "How much they want for a place like that?" George watched him suspiciously. "Well, I could get it for $600. The old people that owns it is flat bust and the of lady needs an operation. Say, what's it to you? You got nothing to do with us." Candy said, I ain't much good with only one hand. I lost my hand right here on this ranch. That's why they give me a job swampin'. And they give me $250, 'cause I lost my hand and I got 50 more saved up right in the bank, right now. There's 300, and I got 50 more comin' the end of the month. Tell you what Dash, he leaned forward eagerly. S'pose I went in with you guys. There's $350 I'd put in. I ain't much good, but I could cook and tend the chickens and hoe the garden some. How'd that be? George half closed his eyes. I gotta think about that. We was always gonna do it by ourselves. Candy interrupted him. I'd make a will and leave my share to you guys in case I kick off, 'cause I ain't got no relatives nor nothing. You guys got any money? Maybe we could do her right now? George spat on the floor disgustedly. We got $10 between us. Then he said thoughtfully, look, if me and Lennie work a month and don't spend nothing, we'll have $100. That'd be $450. I bet we could swing her for that. Then you and Lennie could go get her started and I'd get a job and make up the res, and you could sell eggs and stuff like that. They fell into a silence. They looked at one another, amazed. This thing they had never really believed in was coming true. George said reverently, Jesus Christ. I bet we could swing her. His eyes were full of wonder. I bet we could swing her, he repeated softly. Candy sat on the edge of his bunk. He scratched the stump of his wrist nervously. I got hurt 4 years ago, he said. They'll can me putty soon. Just as soon as I can't swamp out no bunk houses they'll put me on the county. Maybe if I give you guys my money, you'll let me hoe in the garden even after I ain't no good at it. And I'll wash dishes and little chicken stuff like that. But I'll be on our own place, and I'll be let to work on our own place. He said miserably, you seen what they done to my dog tonight? They says he wasn't no good to himself nor nobody else. When they can me here I wished somebody'd shoot me. But they won't do nothing like that. I won't have no place to go, and I can't get no more jobs. I'll have $30 more comin', time you guys is ready to quit. George stood up. We'll do her, he said. We'll fix up that little old place and we'll go live there. He sat down again. They all sat still, all bemused by the beauty of the thing. Each mind was popped into the future when this lovely thing should come about. George said wonderingly, s'pose there was a carnival or a circus come to town, or a ball game, or any damn thing. Old Candy nodded in appreciation of the idea. We'd just go to her, George said. We wouldn't ask nobody if we could. Just say, we'll go to her, and we would. Just milk the cow and sling some grain to the chickens and go to her. And put some grass to the rabbits, Lennie broke in. I wouldn't never forget to feed them. When we gonta do it, George? In 1 month. Right squack in 1 month. Know what I'm gonta do? I'm gonta write to them old people that owns the place that will take it. And Candy'll send $100 to bind her. Sure will, said Candy. They got a good stove there? Sure, got a nice stove, burns coal or wood. I'm gonna take my pup, said Lennie. I bet by Christ he likes it there, by Jesus. Voices were approaching from outside. George said quickly, don't tell nobody about it. Just us 3 and nobody else. They leave Lee to ken us so we can't make no stake. Just go on like we was gonna buck barley the rest of our lives, then all of a sudden someday we'll go get our pay and scram outta here. Lennie and Candy nodded, and they were grinning with delight. Don't tell nobody, Lennie said to himself. Candy said, George. Huh. I ought to have shot that dog myself, George. I shouldn't ought to have let no stranger shoot my dog. The door opened. Slim came in, followed by Curly and Carlson and Whit. Slim's hands were black with tar and he was scowling. Curly hung close to his elbow. Curly said, "Well, I didn't mean nothing, Slim. I just asked you." Slim said, "Well, you been a-skin me too often. I'm gettin' goddamn sick of it. If you can't look after your own goddamn wife, what you expect me to do about it? You lay off of me." "I'm just tryin' to tell you I didn't mean nothing," said Curly. "I just thought you might have saw her." "Why'n't you tell her to stay the hell home where she belongs?" said Carlson. "You let her hang around bunk houses and pretty soon you're gonna have some pin on your hands and you won't be able to do nothing about it." Curly whirled on Carlson. "You keep out of this less you want to step outside." Carlson laughed. "You goddamn punk," he said. "You tried to throw a scare into Slim, and you couldn't make it stick. Slim throwed a scare into you. You're yella as a frog belly. I don't care if you're the best welter in the country. You come for me, and I'll kick your goddamn head off." Candy joined the attack with joy. "Glove full of Vaseline," he said disgustedly. Curly glared at him. His eyes slipped on past and lighted on Lennie, and Lennie was still smiling with delight at the memory of the ranch. Curly stepped over to Lennie like a terrier. "What the hell you Logan at?" Lennie looked blankly at him. "Huh?" Then Curly's rage exploded. "Come on, you big bastard. Get up on your feet. No big son of a bitch is gonna laugh at me. I'll show you who's yella." Lennie looked helplessly at George, and then he got up and tried to retreat. Curly was balanced and poised. He slashed at Lennie with his left, and then smashed down his nose with a right. Lennie gave a cry of terror. Blood welled from his nose. "George," he cried. Let me alone, George." He backed until he was against the wall, and Curly followed, slugging him in the face. Lennie's hands remained at his sides, he was too frightened to defend himself. George was on his feet yelling, "Get him, Lennie. Don't let him do it." Lennie covered his face with his huge paws and bleated with terror. He cried, Stop, George." Then Curly attacked his stomach and cut off his wind. Slim jumped up. "The dirty little rat," he cried, "I'll get, myself." George put out his hand and grabbed Slim. "Wait a minute," he shouted. He cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "Get Lennie." Lennie took his hands away from his face and looked about for George, and Curly slashed at his eyes. The big face was covered with blood. George yelled again, "I said get him." Curly's fist was swinging when Lennie reached for it. The next minute Curly was flopping like a fish on a line, and his closed fist was lost in Lennie's big hand. George ran down the room. "Let go of him, Lennie. Let go." But Lennie watched in terror the flopping little man whom he held. Blood ran down Lennie's face, one of his eyes was cut and closed. George slapped him in the face again, and still Lennie held on to the closed fist. Curly was white and shrunken, by now, and his struggling had become weak. He stood crying, his fist lost in Lennie's paw. George shouted over and over, "Lego his hand, Lennie. Lego. Slim, come help me," while the guy got any hand left. Suddenly Lennie let go his hold. He crouched cowering against the wall. "You told me to, George," he said miserably. Curly sat down on the floor, looking in wonder at his crushed hand. Slim and Carlson bent over him. Then Slim straightened up and regarded Lennie with horror. "We got to get him into a doctor," he said. "Looks to me like every bone in his han is bust." "I didn't wanta," Lennie cried. "I didn't want to hurt him." Slim said, "Carlson, you get the candy wagon hitched up. We'll take, into Soledad and get, fixed up." Carlson hurried out. Slim turned to the whimpering Lennie. "It ain't your fault," he sighed, "this punk sure had it comin' to him. But Jesus. He ain't hardly got no han left." Slim hurried out, and in a moment returned with a tin cup of water. He held it to Curly's lips. George said, "Slim, will we get canned now? We need the steak. Will Curly's old man can us now?" Slim smiled wryly. He knelt down beside Curly. "You got your senses in hand enough to listen?" he asked. Curly nodded. "Well, then listen," Slim went on. "I think you got your han caught in a machine. If you don't tell nobody what happened, we ain't going to. But you just tell and try to get this guy canned and we'll tell everybody, and then will you get the laugh?" "I won't tell," said Curly. He avoided looking at Lennie. Buggy wheels sounded outside. Slim helped Curly up. "Come on now. Carlson's gonna take you to a doctor." He helped Curly out the door. The sound of wheels drew away. In a moment Slim came back into the bunkhouse. He looked at Lennie, still crouched fearfully against the wall. "Please see your hands," he asked. Lennie stuck out his hands. "Christ Almighty, I hate to have you mad at me," Slim said. George broke in. "Lennie was just scared," he explained. "He didn't know what to do. I told you nobody ought never to fight him."